All right, you guys, I am going to walk you through making a rate of change anchor chart for your notes. So the first thing you need to do is just grab a piece of paper. You can grab markers, you can grab a pencil, whatever you are more comfortable with. I'm going to use my dry erase markers, but we are going to make a rate of change anchor chart that is going to help you remember this concept. So the very first thing I want you to do is to write rate of change at the top of your paper. And then you can put the ROC in parentheses if you would like to. Okay. As discussed in class today, we determine the rate of change by finding the change in y over the change in x. Okay. And another way that we can represent that is with the triangle. And remember that that triangle is just an abbreviation for the word change. So the change in y over the change in x. Okay. We are talking about multiple representations, which are linear representations. And those are usually in the form of y equals mx plus b. Okay. Well, you can identify what the x is because that's our variable. That's what we're solving for, right? The y is going to be our other amount that's going to be found in our table or in our graph. The m here, this is going to be the rate of change. M is your rate of change. And we'll talk a little bit more about b later. B is your initial value, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Okay. Now, just like in today's lesson, we talked about representing rate of change in a couple of different places, okay? We talked about equations. We talked about a table. We talked about a verbal description, okay? And we talked about a graph. And you can make these as pretty or as kind of stand out if you want to. All right, so in an equation, if we had the equation y equals 3x, okay, our 3 is going to be our rate of change. If we had the equation y equals 1/2 of x plus 5, 1.5 or 1.5 would be our rate of change. Okay? And our rate of change is just our coefficient that is being multiplied by the x. So again, remember, our rate of change is our coefficient that is being multiplied by the x. Okay, let's talk about how we would find the rate of change in a table. So if we had a table and it had x, oh, I can't really see that. Let me switch colors. An x and a y value. Okay, let's say our x was 1, our y was 7, our x was 3, our y is 11, our x is 7, our y is 19. Okay, so we're going to determine the change from y to 11, so this is adding 4, and then we are adding 8 from 11 to 19. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. From 1 to 3, we're adding 2. And from 3 to 4, or 3 to 7, we are adding 4. Okay? So remember, we're going to do the change in y over the change in x. Okay, so the change in y was 4 over the change in x, which was 2. So our rate of change would be 2. Okay, we have a different value in our third set of numbers, so let's try that as well. So over here, we have a change in y over a change in x. So my change in my y value is 8, and my change in my x value is 4. Right here from 3 to 7 is 4, okay? And 8 divided by 4 is 2. So for both of these numbers, our rate of change, or I'm sorry, for both of those equations, our rate of change would be 2. All right, let's talk about it as a verbal description. So if we were to write a verbal description, like online tickets to the concert costs $50 per ticket plus a $7 fee. Got to get you with those fees. Okay? So if we're looking for the rate of change in this verbal description, we were looking for how it would be changing. Well, it's changing at $50 per ticket. Okay, our rate of change is at $50 per ticket. And remember, guys, we don't always want to rely on clue words. There's a pretty good indication that $50 per ticket is going to be the rate of change, but we do want to look at the entire scenario and ask ourselves, how is this changing, to make sure that we have selected the correct rate of change when we're talking about a verbal description. All right, and as for a graph, so on a graph, we have an X and we have a Y. This one might be a little bit more difficult to write out because everything might be smushy together, but we're going to do the best that we can, okay? So let's say over here we have 10, 20, 30, 40, and the same thing over here. 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, and let's say we have a point, or an ordered pair, at 20 and 20. Okay, so one way that we can determine the rate of change is to do the rise over the run, just like we talked about in class. So we would go up 20, so our rise is 20, and we would go over 20, so our run is also 20. And 20 divided by 20 would be 1. So the rate of change in this situation would be 1. All right, so that's our anchor chart. We're going to keep practicing. Remember that the most important thing about rate of change is to remember that it is the change in y over the change in x, and it can be represented in 4 different ways: with an equation, a table, a verbal description, or a graph. But this is our starting point. This is what we're going to take notes on and refer back to, so when we get confused, we can come back and look at this example. And don't worry, guys, this is a video, so you can rewind and pause and go back and forth as much as you want to until you have it the way that you would like for it to be, okay?